attended the Director General of Nigerian Governors Forum, emphasized the importance of the forum addressing Nigeria energy challenges. He also praised the ongoing effort of the state level to implement electricity acts. He discussed the ongoing effort of the electricity desk to engage stakeholders and industry players to achieve common goals in the energy sector. Dafe Akpene, who represented the NEC, in his remarks, emphasized the Commission's commitment to uphold the mandate regarding electricity regulation, particularly focusing on distribution aspect, which is now under the state jurisdiction. Key point: constitutional mandate. The Ninth Amendment Constitution delineates responsibility, stating that the state have executive authority over electricity distribution, while the federal government manages promotion, generation, and transmission. Challenges ahead: achieving regulation and market functionality in complex, and complex will require time and effort. Special guest of honor, special guest of honor, His Excellency Babajide Sanwo-Olu, the Executive Governor of Lagos State. In his remarks, he was represented by Dr. Bimbola Sali Unde. In her remarks, he said the state is majorly focused on Nigeria energy sector. The event united the key stakeholders nationwide, including federal and state energy commissioners, political leader, industry experts, and private sector participants. The governor's speech highlighted Lagos State's role in the future of Nigeria energy landscape and the need for collaborative effort to address energy challenges.
Okay, so we moved to the presentation and the panel sessions. And the first presentation was by Mr. Odion Omonfoman of New Hampshire Capital. Mr. Odion opened the panel discussion by emphasizing the established reality of electricity markets in Nigeria, moving beyond theoretical discussions. He highlighted that the amendment of the 1999 Constitution and the passage of the Electricity Act 2023 clarified state involvement in electricity markets, removing previous ambiguities and allowing states to participate fully in managing electricity within their territories. The panel discussion focused on the role of state-level electricity markets within Nigeria's border. The event brought together key stakeholders, including state commissioners, industry experts, and private sector leaders, to discuss the challenges and opportunities associated with electricity generation, distribution, and regulation in Nigeria. The discussion emphasized the importance of collaboration, investment, and regulatory reforms to modernize Nigeria's energy landscape. Key remarks from panelists. From the Honorable Commissioner of Lagos State, the Lagos State Commissioner discussed Lagos' leadership role in electricity sector and its commitment to supporting national electricity goals. He highlighted the importance of state-level reforms in transforming Lagos into a key player in Nigeria's energy market. The Commissioner emphasized ongoing efforts to attract investment in electricity infrastructure and improve service delivery, especially for both residential and commercial consumers. The Honorable Commissioner for Oyo State emphasized the crucial role of state-level initiatives in addressing local energy needs. He highlighted ongoing infrastructure projects aimed at boosting generation and distribution capacity. Oyo State is actively working on creating sustainable and transparent electricity markets that cater to both industrial and residential consumers to meet their needs. The Honorable Commissioner of Akwa Ibom outlined the state's efforts to develop its electricity infrastructure, including agreements with gas suppliers to boost generation capacity. He discussed the state's strategy of fostering community-based energy solutions and emphasized the importance of engaging local populations in electricity generation projects. Chief Sunday Oduton focused on the role of electricity distributors and the private sector in Nigeria's energy market. He emphasized the need for competitive markets to drive innovation, improve efficiency, and attract investment. He also discussed the challenges and financial constraints that distributors faced in navigating regulatory frameworks. So moving on to the second panel discussion on the Electricity Act, the role of National Assembly in addressing potential conflicts between the Electricity Act and the state electricity laws to mitigate legal challenges to state electricity markets. The opening remark was given by the moderator, Barrister Nicholas Okafor. He opened the session with a brief introduction to the Electricity Act, emphasizing the importance of collaboration between federal and state authorities to ensure the smooth implementation of the Act. Moving to the panel discussion, the Honorable Commissioner for Ekiti State highlighted the state's effort to strengthen its regulatory framework while aligning it with national electricity market. He emphasized that regional cooperation is necessary because while states can have autonomy in certain areas, the electricity sector is still highly interconnected at the national level. Honorable Oluwasabo Akambi shared Lagos State's experience in drafting and passing its own electricity law, which aligns with the Electricity Act 2023. He emphasized that Lagos took a careful and deliberate approach to ensure that the law would be stable and effective, capable of supporting long-term investments in the state's energy sector. The Honorable Commissioner for Taraba, Engineer Naomi, shared insight into the challenges faced by the state in terms of energy infrastructure and access. She pointed out that Taraba State has made significant strides in creating an independent regulatory body to oversee local electricity operations. Engineer Sanusi Garba, represented by Mr. Dafe Akpeneye, he discussed the regulatory challenges in aligning state-level electricity laws with the Electricity Act. He emphasized that the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission plays a key role in ensuring that state regulations comply with federal laws while allowing states to exercise autonomy in their local markets. And with that, we came to the end of the panel session 2. So,
Okay, so I'll be taking the presentation for Mr. Abba Liu, the Managing Director for Rural Electrification Agency, REA. The topic was about fostering effective collaboration and engagement with state to drive REA's rural electrification and renewable energy initiatives within the SEMs. Mr. Abba Aliyu opened his presentation by addressing the important role of fostering collaboration between the federal government, the Rural Electrification Agency, and various state governments in advancing rural electrification and renewable energy initiatives. He mentioned that the discussion was initially presented by the National Economic Council and subsequently result in the establishment of a new committee focused on improving relations between the federal government and state government in the energy sector. So then we had a presentation by Mrs. Doris Ubo, which is the Executive Director for REA. Her topic was E-Art Project. The E-Art Project is an ambitious initiative focused on providing electricity to rural communities in Nigeria, particularly using renewable energy sources. The goal is to address the energy gap and improve living conditions for over 100 million Nigerians without access to electricity. The project aimed to energize critical sectors such as healthcare, education, agriculture, and transportation, thereby improving quality of life, creating jobs, and driving local economies. So the summary of the discussion that was held from the EHAD project and Mr. Abba Aliu's presentation, the discussion was centered on the importance of collaboration and the challenges surrounding energy provision in Nigeria. So a key speaker emphasized that energy is fundamental to national development and that energy access is not just a local issue, but a national priority. A speaker also noted that the country's energy sector must go through a progressive transformation to ensure equitable access to electricity, particularly in undeserved areas. The discussion touched upon the challenge in the energy market, including the complexities of the power sector and the need for strategic partnerships with innovators to build the capacity for energy infrastructure. Then we had our presentation by Eyo Okpo, who is the team lead for UK Nigerian Infrastructure Forum, UK, UKNIF. He provided a comprehensive overview of the Integrated Resource Plan, that's IRP, and its significance for Nigerians' energy sector. He also outlined the relationship between the IRF and the National Electricity Policy and the Strategic Implementation Plan, which is the SIP. The final presentation was held by Mr. Lawal on the Presidential Metering Initiative, representing Olu Ve, Mrs. Holu. Mr. Lawal, speaking on behalf of the special advisor to the president of the Energy Alliance, provided an overview of the implementation of the Presidential Energy Initiative and its impact on the state electricity market. So the summary of the discussion and questions asked was on subsidy management, where a participant questioned the president's stance on subsidies and how they would be allocated directly to the end users using instead of through intermediaries, and also talked about meter availability, where concerns were raised about the timeline for meter deliveries and the obligation to install them to prevent a potential crisis in the energy sector. They also talked about the data management, where questions were posed about how the data related to meter installations and consumptions would be managed, ensuring transparency and accountability. The closing remarks was done by Commissioner of Abia State, Ikechukwu Monday. He gave the closing remarks acknowledging the long day of the discussion and thanking all participants for the contributions. He emphasized that while the meeting has provided a lot of valuable insight, many questions remain unanswered, particularly regarding financing, subsidy distribution, and implementation of the Presidential Energy Initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we please applaud the communicate team? Thank you for giving us a recap of yesterday's activities, and you agree with me that yesterday was quite engaging, and we had our commissioners expressing themselves on various matters as it relates to power supply and energy. I would like to appreciate the team once more, and we will be moving to the next agenda of this day 3, that will be having a panel discussion. Mr. Odion is busy, but I would be inviting him to take us through the next session. Meanwhile, I would like to ask us a few questions before we move to the next agenda. Okay, on a lighter note. So, if I were to be a cutlery, what cutlery will I be? Sorry, sir. What cutlery will I be? Sorry. If I were to be a cutlery. A spoon. Oh, that's nice. What cutlery? Okay, if I were to be a state, what state will I be? Abia State. Thank you very much. Are you from Abia? Okay, so I'm going to Abia with you, right? All right, yeah. Thank you very much. So we'll be moving straight to our panel discussion, and I will be handing over to Mr. Odion, who will be taking us through the next session. But I would like to invite, before I invite our moderator, I would like to invite the Honorable Commissioners for the various states. I would like to start off with Enugu State, the Honorable Commissioner for Enugu State. Can we please applaud him? The Honorable Commissioner for Enugu State. We would like to invite the Honorable Commissioner for Ekiti State. Can we applaud him?
Please come out, sir, for the panel conversation. Yes. And of course, we'll be having the Honorable Commissioner for Ondo State. We'll be looking at the state electricity market, and of course, I'll be handing over to our moderator for this session, Mr. Odion, who will be taking the session, and of course, we'll be engaging our commissioners. Can we please applaud our panelists and, of course, the moderator?
Ondo State worked in at the right time, so Ondo State, please have your seat. Yes. So I'm pretty sure you three gentlemen know why you're on the high table right now. It so happens that these are the three states that have their state electricity markets as we speak. So a round of applause for them. They've taken the forefront, they've taken the lead to drive this. Now, what this panel seeks to achieve is to get a sense as to your work to get into your state electricity market, learning from what the issues have been, what the potential issues could be for states that are gearing up to be in your shoes, and at the same time, pretty much just making, just sharing your own perspective about it. Now, one of the interesting things about this panel is that we actually have one regulator on this panel. Engineer Kabiala was a former regulator with NERC. He's now a regulator with Enugu State Regulatory Authority. So we have the insight of a state regulator on this panel. Yesterday we heard from the federal regulator. So without much time, let me go straight to Prof. Please walk us through. By the way, this panel is 40 minutes, so we're going to be very quick with our responses. Please walk us through Ekiti State's pathway to getting to creating the Ekiti State electricity market. What were the issues? What do you think states need to learn from Ekiti's process?
Thank you very much. First, before the Electricity Act itself, the amendment as well as the act, before they were passed, the succeeding governors in Ekiti State had put electricity in a primal role in the state, and I started to actually spend money with the notion to the distribution companies that we were devoting assets that we felt must yield results. So there was a lot of expenses on transformers, a lot of expenses on even improving it at 3 kV. Such that when the act came on, we were the first to clap about it, that this actually now put the state in a driver's seat. And the first thing was to enact our own law to put the Ministry of Infrastructure and Public Utilities in a top supervisory role to delineate better the role of the Ekiti State Electricity Board, which manages the state's electricity assets and used to be, to some extent, be the regulatory body. But now we separated its regulatory, its management of government assets from its regulatory body and set up an Ekiti State Electricity Bureau. Before we set up the bureau, there were discussions as to whether it should be an agency or an authority or a commission. But we felt that the quickest way to get the bureau without to get something started without too much political involvement is to set it up as a bureau. And we moved quite a number of people from the electricity board to the bureau. So there was no, you have a commission, you call them commissioners, they will have to have maybe a board over the commissioner. So we had this bureau. The other thing we did was to set up an Ekiti State power company in the law itself, allowing us to set up a state power company. The idea behind that It's not so much to compete in the generation and distribution and transmission and even metering phases, but to ensure that if there is any gap in any of those investments, then the state can take part in it. So we incorporated an Ileyi power company, just as I believe the federal government actually has an FGN power, and Akwa Ibom has a Akwa Ibom power company. So we set up Ekiti Ileyi power company in order for us to be able. So this was in our law to enable us to do that. And then the last thing was to set up an electricity trust fund that had a number of percentages that could be included in the from the various monies that come into the state. 1% here, 2%. So we have an electricity trust fund. So those were the 5 things that were actually incorporated into this law. Once we did that, immediately they took off. I mean, and we worked very closely with the State Assembly. In fact, the State Assembly was very critical in, they had some consultant with them too, and he made quite a lot of suggestions before our law was passed. And from then on, we just started to operate. But within a month of setting up the Electricity Bureau, we had put out 3 orders. I think I sent out all the orders. An order about mandatory metering, an order about tariffs, the one we said that the mandatory metering was the one in which we said no meter, no electricity. The second order was which we talked about the MITO, that we will remain on MITO until all states went off on MITO. And the third order had to do with NEMSA, that we were adopting NEMSA rules because we were having problems with NEMSA. And we said we were adopting NEMSA rules, but we were expecting the DISCOs to ensure that we were the ones who did the full regulation. So after the orders, the issue then was, we then started to have quite a lot of inquiries, especially when we were given that in May with an October 21 deadline. But we kept telling everybody that these are deadlines. That doesn't mean you should wait until October 22 before you move. So quite a number of the companies had done that. Our IBEDC and BEDC got unbundled, I think in June, July. And the next issue was then to license various energy service providers. And recently we've had 14 of them licensed. We've actually had 2 more since then licensed. So we have roughly a total of about 16 energy service providers, MAPs, mini grids, GENCOs, and DISCOs that have been licensed. We are hopeful. We are confident that this will work. And it is a small market. But we have such a large gap between where we are now and where we could be that it is still a large market because of our gap, not so much because of our total size.
Thank you so much, Prof. Ondo State, again, please walk us through how you got into this point, but with particular emphasis on the structures you've set up to manage your electricity market.
Thank you very much. Ondo State set forth at dawn, some approximately 5 years ago. We saw the need to work within our realities. A lot of people thought electricity was within the exclusive list of the Constitution, but we knew it was on the concurrent list, that areas not covered by the national grid, that subnationals had the levers to actually provide governance. That's what informed Ondo State Electric Power Sector Law 2020. We created the law and provided all of the bureaucratic processes to help drive offerings in those areas not covered by the national grid. That's why when the Electricity Act 2023 came on stream, Ondo didn't have so much aberration in transiting because we had a law in place. We had our Ondo State Electricity Regulatory Bureau since 2020. We had staff. Nothing has changed because about licensing, we're licensing mini-grid providers, solar mini-grids. Ondo has more than 50 of those right now. I think we had somebody whispered to me yesterday, one of the people acting this, operating in my state said we are actually the highest in the country, truly, if we sum them together now, because we saw then that Ondo south part of the state had no electricity at all. So mini-grid became a strategic thing to deploy, especially when you have to transport through waters and other places that you can't even reach. If we have all of the money for distribution in Nigeria coming to Ondo State, there are places you will not reach for many years to come. So the mini-grid, solar mini-grid accept, fishermen could now, they have access to they can power their refrigerators and they could support their businesses. So that had been in place prior to the birth of the Electricity Act 2023. So we have, the law we have has the Ondo State Power Council. That is, it has all of the key stakeholders, including representatives of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, some key ministries in government, some public people. So the council is the highest authority about electricity. The law also created the Ondo State Electric Board. That board is the lever of the government to do the basic electricity, powering the government house and some key infrastructure. Then the regulatory bureau, of course, we have that. Then we have the Ondo State Power Company. The power company is the interface with the third parties, and they've done so much. They are the ones that enter into contract when we want to engage third parties, and we have quite a number of those who are creating gas-fired plants and bringing forth 2 megawatts, 3 megawatts, all of those captive in some places. Then what else have we done? So since the law came on stream, what has changed in the state is expansion of our responsibilities. As Prof mentioned, in the case of Ekiti NEMSA, we had the power. For instance, just an example, there is an estate that the governor just said, go power the estate. It's a public civil servant facility. After we completed the project, we wanted to, BDC needed to connect. That's a disco. NEMSA said, for you to connect each unit, they came with some prohibitive costs. They won't let us do that, and we're stalled for more than a year. But when the law came on stream, one of the first things our regulatory bureau did was to issue that license for them to carry on. And Association of Filling Stations also, they met with us. NEMSA will go there once in a year, ask each of them to pay about ₦1 million for its certification or what have you. We also went to now make that easier. I mean, they pay just a tiny fraction of that amount, and that's helping their businesses. So that avenue for exploitation has disappeared. And so many, the energy theft also, prior to now, energy theft, you can do anything, you are just at it's only the disco that could act. But now our law also enables us to, if you see energy theft, you can try people and we can do so much. Then area of energizing, let's say transformers, you have communities that have procured themselves or government has donated, whatever. By the time, as of 2021, we had about 50 of such transformers across the state not energized. So since we had the law in place, we also now have the regulatory toggle to demand that those be connected. Before then, what did we do? We went to court that we sued the disco, we issued some fine, but that didn't work. But since we now have the regulatory authority, the law has now strengthened us better. Another thing we have seen in the new regime is the disco is much more responsive. Then ask them for a meeting, nobody will answer you. Now, a very low officer within my ministry could call for a meeting, the MD of the company will appear. So that has really helped to do things differently. I mentioned at the meeting yesterday about the metering. Also, we realized that when you go through the discos by themselves, they don't have that energy or the excitement to deliver at the time you think they should deliver. So we had to work with them. We went ahead of them to meet meter providers. We only brought them in as collaborators, and that has helped to deliver meters in their thousands to people. I think that's just the overview of where we are. As for the law, we know the law we have to also evolve. We've not been in a hurry to do so. We want this water to settle a bit and see what's going on, to now have a law that will not need to change in another 2-3 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. By the way, I like your shoes. Maybe after this panel, I'll collect your shoes. Okay, so let me find out from the only regulator. So Enugu State, Engineer Kabiala, I've known him for years at NERC, and now he's now a regulator at state level. What I'd like to find out from you is, for Enugu State Regulatory Commission, how are you guys positioned to achieve regulatory independence? Or is there any such thing like regulatory independence, stricto sensu, or you have to balance things with the political side of things? So what are your nuggets in terms of how this balance should be achieved, right? Keeping in mind that honorable commissioners are responsible for policy, and policy drives regulation. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I think there is regulatory independence. At the same time, you may also not have regulatory independence. So what is actually very key and critical is the executives. And when I say the executives, when they start interfering and putting pressure, it becomes a very big challenge. Then another thing that's very key is the law of the state. So if the law gives you that independent power, and then the regulator is willing to exert it, then you won't have much problems. So these are the two things that I think is very, very critical. The executives, what they think, what they believe, and the understanding they have about the role of a regulator, and then what the law provides. So if the law are giving independence, then so be like Enugu State. I would say, fortunately for us, the governor intentionally refused to appoint a commissioner for power and energy. So he's giving us that mandate to make sure we develop Enugu State electricity market. And then one of the things actually we did was being very clear with what the governor wanted. Immediately we started, we looked at what actually is essential for us to do to develop the electricity market. So there are basically two components required. One is to have a buyer and a seller. So based on that, one of the first initial things we did was to set out to get regulations in place to make sure we have a buyer and a seller. Then I also want to say something that is very, very critical. When people have been appointed into position to man the Electricity Commission, how they are appointed also determines how they will run the business and how independent they will be. In our own case in Enugu State, we had about 4 levels of interview. The government team responsible for the establishment of the Regulatory Commission did the first interview. After the interview, then I picked people who now met with the SAG. After that, we also had a final interview with the governor. And at each of these stages, it will speak to, one, you have opportunity to find out whether you will be willing to do the job independently, or whether you are going to do the job to be directed on what to do. And then also speak to competence, whether you are really equipped and prepared to do the work that is required. And one can always say in forum is actually, at this stage, when you need to start building, I recall one of the questions they asked me during the interview was, especially this SHG, how do I want to do this work for Enugu State? So I now started by informing them that definitely this is a new body that is being established, and that I was fortunate to be among the first team in NEC that established NEC. And as a result, we have learned through the ropes in NEC and have started running. So I don't think I will have any issues moving ahead. So that actually was what touched them. And then at the end of the day, I will probably make bold also to say that I'm not from Enugu State, and they still gave me the position. So these are the very key and clear things that actually we need to succeed. Getting people who are very competent and then giving them the freedom to do what they're supposed to do, because you are sure that you have picked the best. It is only when you're not sure you have picked the best that you will now start interfering, and independence definitely will be lost during the process.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure the Enugu model where it doesn't have a commissioner will work. Actually, Enugu does have a de facto commissioner who's the SSG. You know the role of the SSG in the power sector before it became SSG. So I guess for political expediency, they've done it that way. But I would always recommend that you must have a ministry who will be tasked with policy, a specific ministry. Otherwise, you will not have very clear rules. You would have regulators now doing policy, and that won't work. But that's...
Let me probably respond to that. It's not as if it's not in the plan. The governor said for now, he has his reasons. So whatever his reasons, I wouldn't want to start going into that. So there's that plan to have the ministry definitely in place. Like Odion said, the ministry takes responsibility for policies. That is very, very clear. And even in Enugu State, we are mindful of the provisions of Enugu State electricity policy. There is nothing we'll do in the commission without first referring to what the policy the government has put in place, because as a regulator, you can't operate outside the policies and laws of the state.
Thank you so much for that clarification. So one last round of questions, and then we'll open the floor up. So, Prof, very quickly, how's been your relationship with the distribution companies? Because if you really look at it, the nitty-gritty of the Electricity Act or state electricity market is regulating DISCOs, distribution sector. So how's it been working with the two utilities? I think Ekiti State has the rare privilege of having two DISCOs operating outside of Lagos. Yes. So how have you managed this?
We actually have three. So we actually have three DISCOs. We had the IBEDC Ibadan DISCO, we have the Benin DISCO, and we had the Olokiti Distribution Company, which actually distributes our IPP, our independent power generation. So those are three. Prior to now, we did not have too much problem or too many interactions with Ibadan BDC, because they provide electricity for about 4 local governments in the state, in the eastern part and northern part of Ekiti State. Our large interaction was with BEDC, and it was really never friendly. The BEDC gets 9% of national distribution. They give 42% to Benin and Ekiti State, and 22% of that 42% of 9% to Ekiti State. So we never really get more than 18 to 20 megawatts entirely throughout the state. And we always had a very poor relationship with them. When the new unbundling came about, up until I speak, even up until today, and I wish they were here, the structure of the unbundled BDC has not been set up beyond the October 22 deadline. But the one of Ibadan has been set up. They have given us the managing director, the head technical, all the way down. While BDC has just given us yesterday a person they call the coordinating officer, but they've not given us the structure of the organization. And I just indicated this morning that I'm going to have to write to NERC saying that they have not actually fulfilled. I think yesterday you were mentioning something about the fact about NERC's unbundling. You were actually suggesting that, or somebody else was suggesting that NERC should actually ask all the distribution companies to unbundle in each state. Even the ones that we now have full regulation for have not been fully unbundled. So we need to work on that to ensure that they are unbundled. Even if they say that the parent BDC's manager is the manager of the one in the state, the head legal is the one in the state. Let us have that so that we know who we are regulating and not some other. So my issue is that the unbundling has not been complete, and we need to work on that. They're giving us electricity. The other issue is this issue of asset. Where do the states own assets? Is it in the holdco, or is it in this unbundled one? And they actually wrote to us to say that the 100%, the unbundled discos are owned 100% by the holdco, which means that the states still hold their assets in the holdco. And we believe that Edo, Delta, Ondo, Ekiti grouping is not a natural grouping. It was not decided by the people. It was decided in 2013. And the question is, should we be held on to that association as a legacy association without the states being given an opportunity to reconstruct that relationship? Is it better for the Southwest to have a regional grouping rather than Benin, rather than Edo, Delta, Ondo, Ekiti? I mean, just for the heck of it. Thank you.
Very well said. And luckily, we have somebody from BP in the house who we will sit down to have these conversations with. Final question, Ondo HC. Now, one of the critical challenges that people have, actually, if you were in the NESI, if you played in the NESI, you find out that there's always been this conflict between the minister and then the regulator, right? It's always there. How do we, from your perspective, how do we manage this kind of conflicts? Because sometimes you would have this conflict will happen, whether we like it or not. How do we, in your perspective, manage this conflict to make sure we do not, first of all, the ministry retains its independence in making policies. Obviously, the ministry is acting on behalf of the executive. The regulator is also an appendage of the executive, but with some level of independence. How do we manage this conflict, this potential conflict situation?
Thank you. I think everyone playing in the space should understand that you might want to reform, but do not reform too much at a time. And while we want to deliver some superior results, we must also be conscious of the business environment. There are decisions you take that will serve as a dissatisfier to investors. And when they are not comfortable, they're going to be taking subsequent decisions based on their discontent. For instance, in my state, I know some of you will hear all those announcements coming some while ago. The regulatory organization just said license of the disco for a whole senatorial district had been revoked. Just an announcement. And some hours later, about 48 hours, they also announced that another disco had taken over. I mean, while as a commissioner, we didn't jump into the fray we allowed them until the governor started getting very unpleasant phone calls from places that what's going on in your state. So he had to summon us. And part of the counsel that he provided was that however we want to act, let's act in a way that, however persuaded we are, let's act in a way that the friction will not be that huge. And we normalized that relation. We quickly brought the disco to the negotiation table and were able to resolve some of those things. So my take about relations is that the people who have the executive power should put that into work responsibly. And regulatory organizations as well should know that the discourse, we may heap all of the blames in the world on the discourse, but you need to get to that kitchen and smell the coffee for yourself. It's not easy. The same Nigerians, they ask someone to go to a territory and for collection. It gets there, a people, in 3 months, you have to fire them again. So you now realize that you can't play the ostrich and pretend you don't live in the same country and you respect a different order for the people who are playing in that space. By the time they tell you what they are doing, you now can see the extent and the depth of the crisis you have, which come to a national commitment. If anyone has erred, let there be a punishment that will follow through. Then that will be a deterrent so that others will not repeat the same. So if you don't punish anyone, you commit any offense, you go scot-free, we'll continue to scale the same mountain. So final word is everyone participating in this transition, especially the states that have not started at all, we must do so having at the back of our minds that we must work with all stakeholders, not to fight them. Thank you.
All right, so this is where we open the floor because this is where states will discuss. So we're going to take questions. We'll start with Oyo first. Oyo kind of raised his hands first, and then Jigawa, right? Okay.
Thank you. Good morning, gentlemen. My questions really revolve around the markets which you have in your states currently and how you've been able to resolve some of the challenges that we envisage coming up. You mentioned the discos. Have you midwifed the licenses that they currently have or that they had with NERC into your state markets? If so, how did you go about doing that? For context, in your state, we have a single disco that covers the entire state, and I know that may not be the case for each of you. But dovetailing directly from that is, what are your thoughts on separating the wires and cables business, the infrastructure business, from the supply business? and how you've been able to deal with that interconnection. And lastly, I know HC from Ondo has mentioned electricity theft. What kind of penalties do you actually have in place? I know that under the national order, they have certain provisions where they start talking about estimated losses, virtue of those illegal connections. But in an instance where you have a large industry or manufacturing business or a big hotel that has an illegal connection, in many instances, they'd be quite happy to pay the fine, or in these highbrow areas, they'd be happy to pay the fine, knowing that that fine will be significantly less than the electricity that has been stolen. Have you actually considered more punitive measures? We say that we'll ask people to go and sit down in Agodi for a few weeks, knowing that that would be more embarrassing and more of a penalty than asking them to put their hands in their pocket. So those are the few questions that I have, and I think it will help us that are also soon to embark on the journey that you're currently on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think before I say my questions, let me start by appreciating myself and the other commissioners that are yet to reach the level where this three giants has already achieved. I now understand the reason why they are ahead of us. Why I'm appreciating myself and the other commissioners is because, you know, whoever sleeps early definitely wakes up early. So I realized that they have already started long ago, even before the coming of the Electricity Act. So at least I have a relief of mind because I know what we have been going through for us to even achieve where we are now. Thank you for the enlightenment, and thank you for the caution words, because there are so many things that I learned from what you have just said now. Something that maybe I keep on thinking, how do I go about them? Thank God that you have already even cautioned us not to go into that again. That is one. Number two, one of the questions that I wanted to ask, really, Oyo Commissioner has already said. Yesterday, this keep on coming to my mind that in all our discussion, nobody is talking about the penalties, because I even discussed with one of the commissioner, because I'm concerned about that, based on my experience actually. That energy theft is also critical. Thank God that in the presentation it was clearly stated now. Though I don't know which direction you take. By my mind is more of the vandalization issue, because that is the one we suffer most. And even the current happening on the transmission line can tell you that. So in our own various states, this is what we are suffering. And unless we address this, because it's also in the Electricity Act, it is also in our various state acts as well. But it's not about the law, but the implementation. I mean, what are the measures that we set in place so that we can be able to achieve that? Because it's not something that we can do it ourselves. We really need the judiciary side as well for us to achieve that. So my concern is really there, because no matter how much you invest, if this vandalization continues, we will not achieve anything. That is one. Number two, the Honorable Commissioner Ekiti talked about the level of freedom of the regulatory agency. I can vividly remember from the Electricity Act and also our act, in trying to give powers to the regulatory agency, there were so many arguments that we had, even in our assembly. because the process we had before our law came into being might not be the same as other states, but I know ours passed through series of retreats, including the entire National Assembly on the law. So there was so much argument on the level of the freedom. So I don't know what level, if there's any enlightenment that you will give us more on the level of freedom, especially regarding their income, because I saw on the Electricity Act that their income is also a bit independent. Maybe they are the one to even suggest on their payment mode, something of that nature. So you have already implemented your own. So we need to know more on that. Another thing is the issue of unbundling. Although in your second comment you shed more light, but I still need to know what level, because yesterday during the presentation of UK Naib, he made mention on one clause which I am very interested in, telling us that, like for instance, myself, the disco operating in my area is Kerku. It's operating between Jigawa, Kano, and Katsina. But up till now, I know my colleagues are here. Nobody can tell you anything. I mean, any record or data as far as a specific state is concerned. But you can only get a whole. For the whole, we all know how they operate, what they are doing, and whatever. But when it comes to, let's say, Jigawa, I can only be able to know what they gave us through my own assessment, my personal assessment. So the level of unbundling that you talk about, I'm so much interested in that. And if you can please guide us on how that can be achieved, and to what level have you achieved your own as well. Finally, the issue of interstate relationship, because I'm more concerned about that, because I also suffered that one. Like my state, we were bordered with about 4 different states. And there are some communities that are closer to those states. And as I'm talking, we have a community that suffers more than 10 years without sea light, just because they share boundary with Bauchi. They are getting their light from there, from Jos Disco, because it is the one operating in Bauchi. But due to some exigencies, they no longer can get light. Why? Because Jos Disco will give them light, but the billing comes from Kerku. So this issue causes trouble. That's why we are more concerned about the interstate relationship. Like for our own case, is Bauchi and Yobe, because they are the one that we have different disco with. For Kano and Katsina, it's been under, for now, it's under Kerku. So there might not be much issue there. So please, if there is anything that you can shed more light on that, we will welcome that. Thank you.
So what we'll do first is take these 2 questions, and then we'll take the next 2 because the questions are a lot. So over to you, panelists, in any random order that you choose.
I will start with you and then get back to.
So because we have, sorry, Prof, because we have a lot of questions, if the
Quick, I will be very
should be
quick,
concise,
yeah.
so that we'll
Concise. We have the same relationship between IBEDC and BEDC in certain places where they bill in one place and do in the other one. But the unbundling, I believe, should solve some of these problems once they are properly done. If the unbundling is done quite right, actually any of these discos should be able to serve anywhere in the state. But they always like some territorial, what do you call them, exclusions. Utilities always like a certain level of exclusivity so that they can recover some of their issues. On the issue of sanctions, there are 3 levels of issues: vandalization of lines and transformers, energy theft, and now increasingly transformer oil theft. In fact, that was a new one. And transformer oil is very expensive. They drain the entire transformer oil and sometimes take 7 million naira, 8 million naira to replace the oil. So each of the sanctions should be related to the actual theft. And I believe that no one of them should be taken lightly. They should be considered economic sabotage. I think if we lift the sanctions in the energy arena to economic sabotage and make examples, especially of high-level people, because it's not only low-level people who do this theft. There are even judges and other places that do some theft. We need to be able, once we catch one, we make a public example of them. The last issue I wanted to discuss was, I think Oyo asked about discos and the relationships with discos. The guy he's blocking the power. He's blocking the Oyo guy because I want to see his face while I'm responding to him. The discos, I again believe that once their management is in place, or are in place, they must be sat down together with the commissioner, with the regulatory body, to see how we move forward. Because it's not as if they are very keen on this unbundling, but we need to make it work and make it work as quickly as possible. Last issue is about freedom of the regulatory body. I agree with you that the competence of the people who are on there and the willingness of the governor to go along. We just got recently a bill by our state assembly saying that no agency in the state should pass any regulation without it coming through the House of Assembly. We don't agree with that, okay? Because that actually violates executive powers. After you have passed the law, the regulations should come in, and an independent regulatory body should be able to set the regulations, knowing fully that it agrees with the law. Thank you.
Okay, I will probably talk partly from the strength I have being a regulator before coming to Enugu State. On the issue of level of freedom, usually, if you don't give the regulator the freedom they're required to do what is needful, it's one way you scare investors away from your place. Because part of the reasons why you have regulations in place is to avoid some of the heavy bureaucracies in government processes. And that's why actually the regulator, once he has that power, sets up rules that have to be followed. The investors are more comfortable with that than when they are not sure of what they meet along the line. So it's very, very necessary and important you give the regulator the freedom to do what he needs to do. But the regulator shouldn't abuse that privilege. In order to abuse the privilege, when you are coming up with regulations, you are required to make it very public and seek people's opinion and comment. Once that is done, you go back as regulators and then finalize. Once it finalizes that, it's just like a law that is passed by the state House of Assemblies. That's the power you have. So it's very necessary you give the regulator that freedom to do what is needful, but they are required to follow processes in doing what they need to do. Once there's no processes in place that is approved, then they are not really effective regulators. On income, I would say when you have a regulator that you don't pay well, he gets captured very easily. That is the secret. When I was in NEC, they pay us well, fine. So staff are scared of doing certain foolish things because when they are sacked, they won't get another job that will pay them as much as they're earning. That is as simple as that. So there's nothing wrong in paying regulators very, very well. But most times, it's usually benchmarked with what is paid to people in that sector within the state or probably if need be within the federation. Because if you're not paying well, you can't get competent staff to come and do your system for you. Let me give one instance. I hear some of the states talking about following MITO and doing all sorts of things because of competencies. For you to get a modeler, somebody who is very good in tariff modeling, you need to pay him well to keep the person. That's very obvious. So if you don't have that money paid to that person, he will not stay. He will go somewhere else because there are a lot of people calling them. Then mostly, you also pay, have an idea of what is earned within the state, the power the state actually has in paying. Very, very key also. But most importantly, if you don't give regulator enough resources to make them be what they're supposed to be, then you will not get very good hands to do your work for you. I just want to comment on that a bit. Then one beauty of having state regulations is ability to see issues that are bridges and sanction. NEC was not doing effectively, and I wouldn't blame them because of the coverage. But now you have a smaller area to cover. And because you have a smaller area to cover, it becomes easier for you to investigate issues, find faults, and sanction. That is very, very good thing actually I saw from the beginning about this unbundling of the regulations in the state, that from the federal to the states. In Enugu, for instance, when we were constituted, we had information from even within the staff that the management started becoming jittery. Because they were getting away with a lot of things. But they know that once we are there in the state, it becomes very, very difficult. And actually, we are making do with that. Sometimes people will have transformer problems, they will complain, nothing happens. But now, the story is changing. Because we have our customer services standards and protection regulations in place for Enugu State now. And we had made so many provisions in those documents that are very specific for Enugu State. I'll give you one instance. One of the things we put in that customer service regulation is that if a customer complains to you about transformer issues, you didn't do anything satisfactorily, and the customer comes to us after 30 days. We have what we call, like some people are worried about forum. We don't have forum in Enugu State, but what we have, we created what we call customer complaint resolution decks within the commission. And this is supposed to be manned by 2 staff of the commission. Once they're able to, the service provider did not answer you effectively, you now go to the customer complaint forum to complain. And whatever decision they make there becomes binding. And then they are not going to do anything outside what is in that regulation. That's what I'm driving to. And in our regulation, what we are putting there actually, if for any reason a customer complaint is given and nothing is done, and then the rule that probably within 1 month, 2 weeks, fix this and it's not fixed, the service provider will be paying 50,000 naira per day that transformer is not fixed. And our intention is this. That money is not for the commission, it's for the state, because it's supposed to go to the state education agency for government projects, extension of network, probably maybe solar systems in the rural area. So for failure not to pay that money for about a month, we will move the case to the State Attorney General for prosecution. And because of that, whenever people come to us to complain, and then we'll give them instructions, do this, they don't waste time any longer in solving them. While I was here about 2 days ago, I received a notice from a customer that is praising us, thanking us, that the transformer they were even contributing, and will say they should stop contributing, had been fixed and connected and running. So that's one of the beauty of having these subnational electricity regulatory commissions in the state, because you will probably be on top of these companies to make sure the right thing is done at the right time than when it was coming from Abuja.
Thank you. I would like to speak to energy theft and vandalism. Energy theft is one of the biggest issues in our energy market. And for some people, for the states who have not done their law, from our experience, I would just request you to add some clauses. We had an instance, a company bypassed the metering system. The disco got into that. They slammed them with 2 million naira fine. And when we heard about that as a government, I said our bureau wouldn't let them connect until they even pay higher. By the time it was morning, I'd got about 10 missed calls on my phone. Who were the callers? Fellow commissioners. One of the commissioners very close to the former governor, Governor Akeredolu. And when he engaged me, I told him why we would not yield. But the pressure increased. I had to choose between my political future and the job, and we bowed. Another occasion, we slammed BDC with a suit. The Attorney General was called back right in court by the then governor because the disco had reached out to him. Any governor would do this, right? Not that I'm not suggesting the governor was wrong. It's because the law wasn't strong. So in your law now, we should include in our revised law, there will be statements like it's an offense for a public official of any kind to interfere with the operations of the regulatory organization. With that, not even the governor. When you get to the governor, say, sorry, we can't interfere. Let them go through the process. You can go a step further by having a special court for it. The issue of vandalism, that's actually, I lack words to describe how bad that could be. You go climb a tower. I mean, 132 KV line, you tamper with it, you see that coming down, you won't check the implication for environment, to lives, because you want to just get some money. Each of these people arrested, I doubt if there is anyone who has been arrested and jailed. So the law should prescribe even the jail term so that once they are arrested, you are sure they are going to get the justice they deserve. Question about licenses. How are we providing licenses? We issue our first license even before the law. That was July 2023. We issued that license for an IPP. Complexities could be there, but let's give ourselves this benefit of the doubt. Let's enjoy some right to have iterations. We are starting from ground zero. So if you issue a license, I remember the morning we were to issue that license, we had that conversation with the bureau. How much should we even charge? We didn't know what to charge. But we said, let's just charge a nominal figure. We are starting from somewhere. Once we have started working and we are seeing the maths of these providers' inflow, cash flow, we could increase with time because any license you are issuing actually has an expiry date. So we issue the license for an initial period of 3 years. When they are renewed, we can get the right amount to charge. But let's not be afraid to issue license. If we check the basic mechanics and dynamics and we know that we're comfortable, we should be able to issue those licenses. And for interstate relationship, remember that that is still governed by NERC. So the best you could do with states, the Bauchi state you mentioned and Plateau, I think what should have been done was for actors in the two states to set up a meeting to actually discuss it. That shouldn't be an issue that will keep a community in darkness for 10 years. Sit down with the government actors, then get the discourse to come and sit down. I think that should be resolved within weeks and not, it shouldn't linger for years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Commissioners and Regulator there for that wonderful presentation and actually eye-opener for us. You people are our mentors right now. I have 3 questions. 2 will go to Prof, and 1 to the regulator. Prof, when you were summarizing what's the journey so far, you mentioned about your trust fund, the electricity trust fund, because this is one area we considered in our own draft bill, because we believe liquidation is a big, liquidity of the market is a big issue. 1, investment. Yesterday we talked a lot about subsidy. Someone needs to provide that money, and we considered setting up an electricity fund, which will take care of infrastructure, consumer support, and all of that. So my question is, how do you intend to raise funds for this trust fund? How do you intend to manage it, or how are you managing it? Because I think maybe it's already set up, and also distribute it, the distribution of the funds. Then secondly, you also, all right, okay, this goes to estimated billing. Because this is something that I don't know if you can tell me today that it's completely out of your state. So how is, maybe the regulator may also come in here. How is that managed currently, of discos providing our people with estimated billing? Is there any penalty, or is there any time frame when that should stop within the regulation? So then finally, I think this goes to Prof, because in Abia State we also have 2 discos. We have the Aba Power, which came online last year, and their power plant came online this year, and they have exclusivity of 9 local government out of the 17 in Abia State. Okay, this is a license they already have. So I want to also know, and we see it that it will be a challenge, because in our own bill, already draft bill, we said there's nothing like exclusivity. It will be performance-based. So, but we also added a clause of if there's an existing exclusivity, or even if there will be an exclusivity, it must be of public interest, and it must not be valid for more than 5 years. So how are you managing that? And considering you also have 2 discos within your territory. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Standing on all existing protocols. My question is tied to the earlier question from AC Oyo, which was in regards to the cables with the distribution network. The question specifically is, in your states, how are you delineating power supply from power distribution? And the question specifically is, are you investing in the supply of power into the network, or is the way you've set it up focused on just the distribution and the cabling in the sense such that any infrastructure you build will be owned by the respective state, and then the power that's generated and is being utilized on that network is separate from, quote unquote, the power that's coming from the grid that the discos are utilizing? I just want to understand just clearly how you're delineating the power supply from the network infrastructure development, and how does that work in each of your states? Thank you.
Thank you. We need to just check where we are. Nothing is dramatic yet. All of our supplies, maybe, let's say formalistic supply, right now still comes from the national grid. We still get power supply from the Oshogbo booster, comes to Akure. We share the same with Ekiti, that a part of Ekiti. So the new people who are coming in, the gas fire plants, we have a couple of them. One is nearing completion. And what we try to do is to, instead of them supplying to the grid, we have the captive area they supply to. with time and with the quantum of power coming up, the PAP, especially the Ore corridor of Ondo State, we have quite a number of organizations that will be supplying to the national grid as well. So our role in that is largely just regulatory because they are present in our environment. We want to be sure they are doing their operations responsibly. That stays on that front. And for the future, when the commitment of the country to net zero by 2060, Ondo is also working very hard to, currently if we have, let's say 150 megawatts of power hitting our state, we'll say we have sufficiency. We're also projecting that in the next 5 years, could we have up to 50 megawatts coming from solar sources or other renewable sources? That is in the pipeline. Not just that as well, since the state, I mentioned at the forum not long ago, Nasarawa has lithium batteries production plant already with a vision to be able to provide batteries for the entire country. Ondo is focusing on how we can make our photovoltaic cells as well, providing PVs right here in Nigeria. That's going to drive down the cost of solar isolation, of course, of storage, that of storage. And in our laws as well, these are things we might begin to incentivize organizations that can provide energy from sources that we can trace to Nigeria and not panels imported. For instance, if somebody is generating, the license cost could be well reduced if you are making your PVs from Ondo State and from within country. And for the supply, that reminded me the question from the Honorable Commissioner of Oyo State. You talked about the suppliers. How do we even, people supplying, let's say, the cables and all the other, the entire value chain. Our state is working on a law, we call it Ondo State Safety and Standard Law. That is going to help us also get the people supplying things as simple as conductors in our state. We will have a process to be sure you have the quality conductors going to our market and all of the other accessories. We have started that by engaging all of the people in the market in the state. We've had some various meetings with them. As time goes on, you will not sell anything electrical in our state without having a license to do so. And we have another mechanism that will ensure that we check what you claim to be supplying, that they are truly quality items. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of the trust fund, I went in to look at our law again, and you see section 47. There are actually two funds specified in our law. A fund for the electricity board and what we call a state energy and electricity sector support fund. And it is that electricity sector support fund that I believe Nasarawa or Kog, it was talking about. And that states that 5% of new building approval fees, 30% of carbon credit, 30% deductions from proceeds of right-of-way payments, and we've crashed our right-of-pay payments to 145 naira per linear meter. So, and it specifies all of those. And all trust funds of the state are managed by bonds. In fact, the last exco, another trust fund came up, and I said, we have all these trust funds all over the place, having 5% of this and 5% of that. And the governor said, look, we have to really sit down and set up all these trust funds. Because you were asking whether this has been set up. It is in the law, but we have not set it up yet to start to function. But at least that's what laws do, empower you to do things. And when you are ready to do them, then you do them. So that's to do with the trust fund, how we will fund it, how we will manage it, how we will distribute it. That's, they are all in the law. Concerning the issue of existing power companies, just as you have Abia Power now, Geometric, we have Ekiti IPP, and they have their own Olokiti distribution company. Ibadan and Benin subsidiaries manage, for now, grid electricity. But quite frankly, the next set of distribution companies should not be looked at as only distribution companies. That has been their major problem from the very beginning. They became just collection agents. Going forward, we should not allow distribution companies just simply to be distribution companies. They should be full energy providers, from generation to transmission to distribution. So we are looking for them to grow beyond just being collection agents. And I think that's how we will want to have them develop. Again, every utility wants some exclusivity, some geographical exclusivity. But there should be times when boundaries cross, especially in the urban areas. I do not see why in Ado Ekiti, 2 discos cannot be supplying Ado. But in the rural areas, you may have one supply for local governments, another supply, another for local governments, and so on. But in areas where you have a lot of people, even in that very same place, you should be able to have some competition. And this is my experience. I mean, I lived abroad for 30, 40 years. My experience has been that you just, once you are not happy with one particular disco, you just send information and they start to provide you. I think there's room for that even in Nigeria.
Okay, with the permission of the moderator, I will probably want to address something briefly from the previous questions, then I will now address some of the issues raised now. On issue of establishing subsidiary, I will probably want to give you a story of what we had in Enugu when we started. The law provided 2 months for this to be done. Then at a point, we were pushing. So what actually we did was we had meetings with EEDC. We reminded them of that provisions. Most of them were not serious about it and were not even ready to do anything. So at a point, we also transmitted the message to the state government about the need to push, because there are actually some responsibilities that are supposed to be driven by NERC per se. So when we now put the pressure through the government, they were forced to do that registration, because we know it's going to be key to anything we want to do in the state. If there's not a company within the state that will regulate, then everything is useless. So based on that pressure, they were able to get these things done within the first 3 months. Established a board for the new company, so we didn't have much of that problem. But when that was going on, something happened. The state wanted to get involved. We now had to warn the state that getting involved will muddle up the whole thing to the extent that even court cases may come up. At the end of the day, this thing will not be done and will cause a setback in the process. Hopefully, happily for us, they listened to us and stayed back and then pushed them to do what they needed to do. But going forward now, any other discussion that will happen will now be a discussion between the state and the subsidiary, not with the state and the EEDC. So, but now we don't have any issues with the establishment of the subsidiary, because we have the board in place, they have the management team, and we are relating freely with them. I'm only saying this for those of you that actually are planning to come on board. Don't let anything that will stop that process happen, because if it happens, it will delay your movement forward. And then try to use the weight of the state to let them do what is needful. Then on the issue of a trust fund, our state law provided that the Enugu State Electrification Agency should set up a fund, just like the REA, anyway, for rural electrification and also for investment in the state. So if the state is going to do any project, maybe wire extensions, support to communities, those will be done through that fund. And then part of the money that will come from the fund will come from our fines. That's why we are very strong in making sure we monitor and enforce, because that will also help the state generate fund for the projects they want to do within the state to support the community. Then we also had gone ahead to have a memorandum of understanding with InfraCredit and Infrastructure Bank to support projects that will be going on in the state. That actually will have gone past and we have secured that. So it's going to be a situation where we issue a license, then based on the weight of the license, they will do the needful to support anybody who is coming to the state to do project development. Then I will probably want to caution that it may not be of the best interest of a regulator when states start getting involved in having operators within the state. Because from studies, it is difficult for any regulator, whether state or federal, to regulate government entities. Very, very, very difficult. So if you want to really play a regulatory role, it's usually best for private operators. Try to encourage them to come in, and then that's going to be effective in regulation. But if it is government entities you want to regulate, it is usually very, very difficult. Just as a caution to those who are still trying to put in place their documentations within the National State Assembly and then approvals. Then on estimate, yes, I would say we were a bit smart to issue terms and conditions of license to the state subsidiary now, which is Manpower, to still go on with next cap. So why we did that is because we are not fully settled to solve some of these issues. So we now made it available and make it formal. So what it means now that now if there's any issues, complaint on estimate, we will make reference to what NEC has, because NEC adjusts cap every month. So now we are absolved from that problem for now, because we have already indicated it in the condition of service that this is the condition of license, the terms and conditions of license, that they had to abide by that, pending when we resolve the issues we want to resolve about metering, and then about customers that already placed on estimate. So it is not clear how we'll go about sanctioning them when there's a breach. So once they come, we'll check to verify from NEC that this is the cap they've issued, and then once that is settled, the case is resolved. Now, I want to probably also touch briefly on the issue of delineating power. I will probably want to share also our experience, because I think this is more of experience sharing. It is usually difficult for you to delineate wire business as such. So, but I will also say we'll be fortunate that Enugu State Electricity Policy had provided a market design even before we came on board. That market design requires that we license electricity retail companies. And then if for any of those companies to use the network of the distribution company at 33 kV, then they are required to pay distribution use of system charge to the owner of those wires. But they will now go ahead and have their customers and then collect money from them based on what they supply from them. But before you do that, you must have a power purchase agreement that is in place to enable us know that you are ready to buy power to give to people, and not just start business that has no end.
The cap issue is very important. Actually, that is what is driving many of the discos to talk about meters now, because the cap is very low, extremely low, and they are indicating that if they in fact keep to those caps, they will lose money. I think it's about 112 kilowatt hours per month. It depends, it's on a monthly basis. But they have indicated to me that those caps are very low, and they will prefer to actually bill than to do estimated billing. So you need to find out either the caps for your companies or for your state and you ensure that even before all this our regulation, you can protect your citizens by ensuring that if they build them, it's not beyond the estimated cap.
We're after the
Thank you,
last comment
Prof.
from Ondo, we'll close.
Thank you. I just must mention this because sometimes when we sit on the side of the divide, we speak from the side of government. We don't think about the consumers. We need to invest for all the state governments. We need to invest in deorientation and reorientation. The consumers should see electricity as a commodity they must consume and they will pay for. Many of our people see electricity as a social intervention by government. That's why they are so brazen when it comes to bypassing the metering system. They've been doing that since time. So, as I always will say, that it's no longer government electricity. It's actually some business people's electricity. That's going to help. In my state, we have radio jingles appealing to them to understand the difference. And these schools are seeing some improved collection rate in some of those suburbs where they don't even pay at all. And all of the things the discos use to get their money, they could be brute force. They could be termed brute force sometime. But when you check it from the area of their cash flow area, you will see that what they are doing is what they must do. So if our people get to the point where they know they must meet their own obligations, you might be shocked that ATC and C losses will go down dramatically. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A round of applause to this excellent panelists. I know people have questions, but we really need, we have a lot of things to discuss, and we need to go into the executive session of this forum as well. But before we before we close the panel, let me just say this. See, electricity is a commodity, as Ondo has said. But guess what? States have started the competition to attract a number of things in their market using electricity as a tool to compete. So yes, these three states and all of us here, we might be partners, we might be in the same forum, but make no mistake, the ability of a state to develop its electricity markets and make it viable and sustainable will be a competitive tool to attract investment, investors, and improve social capital in your state. So yes, let's share knowledge, let's share ideas, but always keep at the back of your mind, competition among states have started, and we need to drive it. On that note, thank you so much to Enugu, HE Ekiti, and HE Ondo for this insightful panel. Please, can we have for a group picture, forum chairman, and Lagos State as our host? Let's take a picture with this very distinguished panel. Well done.
Thank you very much. Can we please applaud our panelists? Thank you very much, sir. And we'll be moving straight to the next session. I will be inviting for a discussion on the state equity in DISCOs and NDPHC. How can states play more involved roles in the management of successor for DISCOs and NDPHC within the ambit of the state electricity market? And to take us through that, I'd like to invite from the Bureau of Public Enterprises, I'd like to invite Mrs. Olisa Mechi-Joy. Can we please applaud her as she comes up to take us through the session? While she's coming up, please kindly note we have some feedback forms in front of us. Please let's ensure that we give our candid feedbacks, and we will be retrieving the form at the end of the day. Thank you very much. Please ensure you fill the feedback form just to get an assessment of the whole forum. Thank you very much.
This session is more like a discussion session, and straight to the point. The objective of this session is straightforward. States in 2013, privatization of successor discos, 11 successor discos occurred. Now, that privatization was a share sale process. And that process meant that the federal government claimed they sold 60% of its stake in the successor PHN companies, and 40% was left. That 40%, there was some allocation where labor was supposed to get a percentage, the federal government was supposed to retain some equity, and then state governments grouped along the boundaries, the franchise areas of the utility, were also supposed to have equity stake. 11 years after privatization, nobody, including states, can put their finger as to what exactly is their equity in successor discos, right? Now, there's a background to this. A number of states, prior to PHCN, had made investments in their distribution infrastructure. As a background, Kano State had what he called the Rural Edification REB, where they invested in distribution infrastructure. The then Midwestern state had the same, many other states had. And these infrastructure were transferred to NEPA and then PHCN. Beyond that, post-privatization, a number of states are making significant investments in disco utilities, buying transformers, building feeders, 11 kV, 33 kVs, and other things to help improve service without any form of recognition in terms of ownership, right? So what this session seeks to achieve is to get a sense as to what exactly has been the process in identifying state, and then what can you share with us as to how we should go about, how states should go about making sure that that equity is settled. There are also feedback as well, because it's not a one-way street. We would also share with you our thought process, how states are thinking, how this should be addressed. So we're not expecting all the answers from you. It's just for us to have an interaction that can set a plan or a path forward for us to execute. So you're welcome to this forum, and you have the mic.
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. On the issue of the discos. And
sorry, madam, maybe you could introduce yourself first.
Okay, my name is Joy Olisamechi from the Bureau of Public Enterprises. Okay, so on the issue of the discos, an initial valuation was done in 2018, to spell out the assets owned by the states and the local governments. But the governors afterwards requested that an updated valuation should be done to include the new investments done by the states and the local government. And the initial evaluation that was done in 2018 was done by NEC. And NEC is the one that is still doing the update. And up till now, they have not concluded it. So we're waiting for them to conclude the valuation so that the transfer process can begin. On the part of NDPHC, we are aware that the states have collected their share certificates. However, there's an ongoing transaction right now, but it had to be stalled because we still need approvals from the board of the NDPHC and the National Council on Privatization. That is where we are for now.
If you could give us an insight on the NDPHC transaction, because these are commissioners of power in their respective states, so they're carried along.
I don't know if I am supposed to discuss that. Anyway, it's the NIPPP project.
I'm not sure it's such a it's not confidential, because
I know.
The government has decided that they want to sell 5 or 10 power plants.
5 of them. Right.
So I think it's in this forum, people should be aware, or the commissioners who will brief the governor should be aware what the status is. We can't have conversations way, way above the states and the parties who should be very well versed in these transactions, right? So that's why part of this conversation is let's have that feedback. Let's engage so that we can also support the bureau as well.
Okay, I'm saying that because there's a level to which I can disclose information here because I was sent to just come here. Yes.
Let me open the floor to the honorable commissioners because there are also other issues. So please, floor is open.
Thank you very much. But before I say anything, let me get the clarity. Are you a representative of the NDPSC or the BP?
The BPE.
The BP.
Yes.
Thank God. I could remember early this year, there was a delegation from my state to BPE. We had a meeting, so you were not there. I don't know. No, you're not in the meeting?
Okay. Yeah.
We went there because of this share issue.
Okay.
Our disco approached us, myself, Kano, and Katsina. I know they all approached them, but I'm talking on behalf of my state alone now because the effort was made by my state. A committee was said to go to BPE because the disco approached us to purchase more share in their 60% ownership. So we were baffled with two issues. Number one is, does the law allow us to have more share in their 60%? That is one. Number two, the value of the share they gave us, of their ownership. Because the ownership is 60 by the private, by the disco, and 30%, the remaining 40 is by the government, which includes the state and federal government. So that is one question. Number two, what are the bases for evaluating those shares they presented to us? Why we are concerned is because they made some presentations with regard to the share price. The first presentation, the amount they gave us is different from the second presentation, but we note that. So we don't know the actual basis they used. Number three is, what is the status of the share we claim to have from, is it 2000? I mean the earlier, from 2013 to 18, I think. So even that one, what is the status? But unfortunately, after our meeting with the BPE, not all questions were answered. And some of the questions, like you just said now, they were telling us it should be off record, unofficial. So if at all you will discuss with people that you think they are handling your own share and they don't want to tell you something officially, that scared us actually. Let me be specific. Regarding our shares, we came to learn that if we really push to get the share, it is attached with so many liabilities. Instead of getting a benefit from it, you'll be ending up financing it. That's what we realize. Now, we say, okay, since the other one is attached with the liabilities, how then can we purchase another share in addition to, even if the law allows us? Because what we think, if we can buy from the 60%, then now our disco will own less than the 60%. So we are thinking of, let me be frank with you. I go to the extent of even meeting the next chairman, one-on-one, on personal ground. I discussed this issue with him. He gave me his advice. And so many people that I contacted on personal ground, yet there was no answer. Yet we are here to decide on what to do. So please, I don't know whether you can give us any leading comment to this regard. Thank you.
Madam, are you in a position to provide any opinion on this?
No, I am not.
Okay. So here's what I think we should do, right? Because part of the agenda is to discuss amongst the forum, take a position as to how this issue should be resolved. The problem is that we've left this to the federal government, BP and co, and some people somewhere to resolve your equity participation in entities that you will regulate. And I don't think that's right. Because clearly we've not made progress, and I'm not sure it's because we don't want to make progress. I'm pretty sure there are other issues out there, but it's irrelevant. Guess what? These are your investments. So I think this in the next 30 minutes, what we should do, and I'm glad to hear from honorable commissioners, because she's also here as a messenger. She will take our feedback. So it's not a one-way, come tell us. We're also telling the BP through her. So I think one of the things we should discuss is how this matter should be put to bed. The first question is, look, for BEDC, just using BEDC as an example, 4 states, Edo, Delta, Ekiti, Ondo. BEDC is now supposed to form 4 subcodes. The question is, state shareholdings, right? Where should it be resided? Should it still be at a single BP? Or now that you've divided, each state now has a subco, why don't the state equity devolve to the subco within their state? Because that's where the investment of the state was made. So that's one option. The second option is, look, how do we capitalize the fact that there are a number of assets that the states have put in and there are no returns yet from the utilities that we claim have investments? Do we then say, okay, if this issue is not resolved, can we just take back the assets, license it to another third party, or start to charge the utilities a fee for you to use those assets? So for instance, if you constructed 11 kV feeder and the distribution company is using it to serve customers without recognizing your investment, don't you think it's time to say, okay, fine, I've built this investment, you have to pay me a fee to use it, or you get a third party to manage your investment for you, right? So there are a number of opportunities or options that we have on the table, but I think this meeting can't end if we don't have a clear direction or proposal to put to the BP, NEC, and the federal government on this. So the floor is open. Oyo, over to you. Okay. Okay. All right. So the discussion. Okay. So very clearly, the conversation is this should be part of the the closed discussion. So, Madam, thank you so much for for sharing what you shared with us. Yes. Or you have any other engagement? No, but the I'm not going to talk about this issue the way we are presently constituted. Those who are not ACs mostly be. Okay, so we'll have a working session, but the question is, should she be part of it or not? Okay. Why can't she not? It's our topic. Let's be able to say to her so that she will have a robust feedback to take away. You want to write? Okay, we'll write. No problem. See, excuse me, background. We visited a few people and we called some of the people that we are expecting here. Your boss is one of the people that I reach out to, and I'm aware that you are coming. You are coming to represent and take away the notes from this meeting. I'm strongly recommending, even if it is a 10 minutes, if it's a 20 minutes, let her go away with a note that is rich enough to brief. And our boss is also fairly new on this beat. All right? So their backgrounds we have.
that we may also want to start. There are people who are also looking at us and thinking we are not going to be riotous, but we are going to be coordinated and we will deal in a very strategic way. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for that prologue, Commissioner from Lagos State. I think we need to discuss amongst ourselves first. I share your opinion about her being there, but I think amongst ourselves first, we need to discuss before we bring her in and tell her whether our singular position or diverse positions. Thank you.
Well, I mean, she'll be in an uncomfortable position with us being. So let's just relieve her of that uncomfortable position, and let's talk frankly among ourselves, and then communicate it to. This is, a commission too. We went to BPE at some point too. About 6 commissioners visited. I was one of those. I think. Okay, you couldn't go at that time. So this is not the first time we have been to BPE on this. But we need to put our feet down now. Because now, I know, but we should go and meet with him or her. Okay, but I think for this session, we should have a closed.
2 more comments and then we'll decide.
Madam Olisa, with all due respect, we appreciate your frankness that you didn't come in so. But just like Prof has said, clearly, we're not comfortable with the opaque position that BP has come to us as a forum with this morning. And clearly, by converse logic, there's no way we would also be comfortable discussing openly. We appreciate your holds or whatsoever, but please, with all due respect, you will excuse us. We will take a position. There are still a couple of hold items which we need to talk within ourselves. And if we don't have a concurrent, clear position as a group, we can then involve other people. But we would come to BP with a clear position on the position of states vis-a-vis equity holdings with these. Because if that doesn't happen, then the take-off point for the subcos is already jaundiced from day one. Thank you.
Chairman, over to you to final words on this.
Well, thank you very much. My contribution is that this BPE issue will form one of our very serious, engagement when we meet in a closed-door session, because from the way she speaks, she doesn't look like she has the kind of information we need from her. I want to equally add that one of those issues that our communique will address will be one of these when we discuss in our closed-door section. Please, she's been on the hot seat. I want to beg that you don't let her go. Just take a bow, madam, please.
Thank you very much. Let's appreciate the chairman for. Thank you very much, sir. We'll be going straight for tea break, and thereafter we'll be having the closed-door session. Please note that the closed-door session will be for only honorable commissioners, and we request, and the representative of states that are here, please. So we'll be moving straight for tea break for the next 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes for tea break. Thank you very much. On the first floor.
First floor,
First
please,
floor.
Please
note that
12:15, let's be here.
Yes. Please note that the tickets have been passed around.
12:15, please, let's be here.
Signify if you don't
Only
have the
commissioners and representatives of